Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Gerben. Today we have some very interesting content about Azure Static Web Apps in combination with the Blazor WebAssembly.
True.
Rick?
True. Yeah, and again, I'm going to do static web apps again since I'm such a fan. But we have some nice content to show today, since we will have an API with a Blazor WebAssembly front end, and then we will configure it to use login using the config options that you have for Azure Static Web Apps.
Okay.
So let's dive into my machine. And then first of all, what we see here is that we have 3 projects in our solution. Then we have an API project, which is an Azure function, of course. Some models, and then our web application, which is a Blazor WebAssembly app. And this is nothing too
fancy.
Nothing too fancy, but there's still some cool stuff in there. So let's go and have a look, first of all, at the API, where we specify an entity, and in this case, a video entity. So we're doing a video on the videos. So that's kind of Inception-like. And then, first of all, what we see here is that we have this name right here, where we have an ignore property attribute on top of it. And this is actually my way of using the row key to store the name. But then in my model, I can actually use the name, and then the ignore property makes sure that we don't store it a duplicate in table storage. So this way I misuse the row key to store the name, and then I have it in the name property.
But you mapped it to a more, to a better name, to a more proper name, and then still map it to the row key.
Yes. And then we have a get videos function right here. And then what we do here in the end is we have a table binding where we say I would like to have a cloud table with a specific partition key, in this case that comes from the route that you can see right here.
Okay.
So we have an API /video/ and then you can use the partition key as an input parameter. And what we do is we query the table for this specific partition key to make sure that we get all of those videos out. Now, as soon as we run this API locally, and I'm going to right-click it to be able to do debug and then start a new instance, since I would like to have the web application to still be the starter project.
This way you can also debug the function and have the web application as a starter.
Yeah, true. So what's happening now is the function is starting up, and one thing that might stand out from what normally happens is I don't have the emulator running anymore. Because, I mean, we've all used the Azure Storage emulator, but there's still also some compute emulator UI in there from long time ago. And the emulator is no longer the preferred way of using storage locally. Microsoft has moved over to Azurite. Azurite is a local emulator that actually does blob, queues, and table storage already, and it's cross-platform. And that's the reason why Microsoft's pushing more towards Azurite, which means that I have a Azurite running locally right here, so that I have my information. And then right over here we have where my functions are running. And then as you can see right now, of course, I switched some stuff up right before the demo. So we get some red in here. In the end, what we have is we have the API running in the browser also, together with the application. So we will see how the function works later on. Now,
and Azurite is something that you download separately for now, or is it already integrated?
No, it's not integrated. And to be completely honest, Visual Studio still tries to start the old-fashioned emulator as soon as you open up a functions project. Let's add emulator to the search so that we can at least find the emulator. And then what you should do is if you run a functions app locally and you don't want to start the old school emulator anymore, inside of your project, you can have a start development storage entry right here under your property group of the project. And then this will make Visual Studio no longer start your old-fashioned development storage.
Because would you have a problem, let's say that they both start, do you see anything weird? Is it going to one or another, or does it try to start up on the same ports? Or?
Yes, so it's not going to work. They both use the same ports. So as you can see in our terminal tab right here, it uses localhost, of course. But then in the end, they both use the default endpoints, which mean that even with Azurite, you can still use development storage equals true as a connection string, and it will point to your Azurite
point to
instance.
that one, to the host, yeah.
So you don't have to do anything special right there.
So that will stay just the same if you're using one or the other.
Yeah, true. Now, next thing we have is we have a separate model right here where we have the name, the title, the description, and the URL of a video. And the reason I explicitly separated this out is so that our get videos functions that we have right here currently doesn't, but could only show the model, so it doesn't have all the internal information like an e-tag or a timestamp. So that way you can separate out the models that actually your API is going to talk with from what you want to use in the front end.
And it's a cool thing because, as you know, I'm a pen tester, and there's something called mass assignment, or that you expose properties that you don't want to expose. In this way, you make a nice encapsulation.
True. Although I didn't implement it in my API, but
you could do it.
That's beside the point, right? But what I actually wanted to show is that now that I have a reference here from my front end to that models project, I can use the models that I should be returning from my API as the models in my front end. So I only specify them once, and I can use them on multiple locations. So as soon as we start working with front end frameworks like Angular or Knockout or Vue,
that's really old.
It shows how old I am. But then you have to have like TypeScript or JavaScript representations of your models. Here we can just reuse what we have already. And then
you get all the nice things inside of your IDE, and that's
So what we have right here is a videos Razor component in our front end where we actually say, I would like to inject an HTTP client. So we have dependency injection right there. And then we have as long as my videos equal null, I'll show something that it's loading. And otherwise, if videos is no longer null, I'm going to bind it to this table. That's not all too complicated. And then right here you can see that actually getting them from the backend is as simple as doing an http.getFromJSON async, and we're getting a video array, and we're just talking to our backend. So when I run this locally, my web application will be running on its own port, and of course my functions will be running on port 7071. So there I will have to do some magic on how to get those connected to each other.
Yeah, some mapping or something to get. And this is the same for whether you're running Blazor on the server or when you're running it on WebAssembly.
Well, in the end, the thing is that as soon as you're targeting something like static web apps, we don't have a server component, so that will not be the case if we're running it there. The cool thing is that we have the Azure Static Web Apps CLI right now, where we can actually say, so this is my functions app, this is my front-end app, and then it will bring them together on the same URL, also locally for debugging purposes.
Cool.
So I push this out into Azure, and then if we go and look in our Azure portal, and we'll open it up right here, and we go to our Datatox SWA, our static web app, here we can see what's happening with this web application. The way you configure this, that's something that we've shown in previous videos, is you define that you want to look at a specific repo in GitHub, and you specify where the front end and the back end is, and then it creates this build definition for you. But I would like to show something I think even more cool. So opening this one up, we will get a loading screen, then we'll have a hello world, welcome to our new Datatox app. And then if we go to videos, it will show the loading just as it defined in it. And then here we have Datatox 34 and 35. Both of them are in here, and then if we click them, we can even get the URL of the video and we get it to play. Now the cool thing is, this actually works and runs, right? And then if we go to our network tab and we refresh.
Yeah, because that's interesting to see how WebAssembly actually runs and what kind of requests are made.
Yeah, and then this is the first thing. As soon as I go to a sub URL of this application, it will say this is a 404. Because it actually needs to go, just like with Angular, to the index.html, which figures out this route.
Yeah, because it's client side. WebAssembly is also running on the client side.
Yeah, so I can do it like this, and then we still get our information. And then right here, we can see that our request is API/videos/beta-talks, that one.
Yeah, that's the one that you made in the code, and you can see it now reflecting in your network tab.
True, true. Because the cool thing is, of course, we have that last location of our URL to be the partition key of our videos. So if I would, for instance, do now podcast, I would get this other type of video that I don't have on this application, since this is from the podcast and not from baeta-talks, the videos. So we get information from podcast here as well, and if we do baeta-talks, then we'll get different videos back. Okay. Now what I actually wanted to show you is the fact that I would like to be able to shield my application with a login. And then
because at the moment, anybody can just access this,
everybody
the endpoint and your API and everything. Okay.
Yeah, and the content is not that strictly forbidden at this point, but still. So let's say that I would like to have this behind a login, and then if I'm running an app service, the easy implementation would be easy auth, which is I flip it on, and then I specify how somebody needs to log in, and then they can log into my application. Well, Static Web Apps actually has something similar. So if we go into my Visual Studio, and I will go into my, let's see, root, and then I have this on my main branch, so I don't have it here yet, but I added a feature that actually says feature/security1001, and then under that location, in the root, I have this staticwebapp.config.json file. Now here is where the magic happens.
Yeah, this.
So there's some specific endpoints which are all available in documentation. For instance, when you log in with GitHub or with Twitter, and in this case I'm logging in with Azure Active Directory. So if anybody is going to request the route /login, we're going to rewrite that into being .auth/login/AAD.
And that are the predefined routes. So the .auth are the predefined routes, and with the rewrite you can have more or nicer names and then route it to those endpoints. Okay.
Yes, so those are available for, like I said, GitHub or Twitter or Azure Active Directory, which also works for a Microsoft account, for instance. Now, there's something cool happening up here, because what I'm saying here is my route videos, I would like it to only be available for authenticated users. And then as far as allowed roles go, there's also some special names, because we have unknown or unauthenticated, we have authenticated, and then we don't care what role somebody has, they just need to be authenticated.
Okay.
But you can also say somebody needs to be authenticated and have a specific role. And those are not bound to anything that you need to work with. You can just say an administrator, or you can define your own role names.
And do you know where they get that roles from? Is it from the JWT token that's sent, or?
Well, that's the cool thing. If you go into the Azure portal again, then under my static web app, we have role management right here. Now, if I would like somebody to be able to access my application under a specific role, then I can go to invite. I can say that I would like to have somebody with, for instance, this account, log in. So we can use Google, Twitter, Facebook, GitHub, or Azure Active Directory.
And these are the same providers that we showed you in the configuration.
Yes. And then we'll take my own domain, and here we can have a role. So I could, for instance, say this is the Rick role.
Yeah, so but it's custom, so I don't think Rickroll is.
This is a horrible name, but I could do so.
Yeah.
And then I can generate an invitation link. I get the invitation link right here. It's masked because I have this awesome plugin installed that masks everything that's secret in the Azure portal. It's AZ Mask. Use that if you ever use Azure portal during demos.
Demos or live screencasts or something.
Yeah, that's awesome. But now I have this invitation link, and I could go there and accept my invitation. But what I want to show is the fact that, as we saw right here, this change, together with some small changes to the UI, is in a separate branch. And what I also did in this config is I can have a navigation fallback, where I actually say, if you can't find something, then always go back to index.html except for CSS files, which means that that 404 when I refresh videos shouldn't be happening anymore after I publish this.
Yeah, because it's getting you redirected back to the index.html.
And then the index.html says, hey, you want to route videos? I have a component for that, so I'll serve you that one.
And for CSS, you don't want this because you would get routed back to the index.
And then you don't have CSS anymore. So for images, you should also add an exclusion if you have any images on your web app. And then what we could also do is have in case of a 401, so somebody's unauthenticated, we redirect to the login page, which in the end goes to .auth/login/AAD.
So it's unauthorized, and then you get...
Yeah, and I can reroute a 404 to a specific location. I can even set global headers, in this case a content security policy. And I can set MIME types, for instance, for a JSON file to be text/JSON so that we can download JSON files if we would want to. So that's everything available in staticwebapp.config.json. Now I push this out, but I push this on my branch. And now the next cool part, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that if we go to GitHub and I go to my own profile and I'll open up the Betatalks SWA repo, which should be the top repo on this page. I'll make that a bit bigger. The cool thing here is you can see that I have a pull request open already. And I have this pull request open for my feature/security 001 branch, which is the branch with the staticwebapp.config.json. Now, if we go to actions, we can already see that it automatically ran for that pull request. And going to the pull request, I think even if we open it up...
Is that an action that you provisioned beforehand in this specific repo?
That's what Azure configures for you as soon as you point a static web app towards a repo. So it builds a workflow file for you. And then that's what I think is the cool thing here, it says after you've built a pull request, your stage site is ready. Visit it here. And so that's in the pull request, but also if I go to my static web app and I go to environments, I can even say this is my main production, and then I have a staging slot here for the feature/security 001 branch. The branch, I can click here to go to the branch as well, or to the pull request. But then here I have this browse button, and if I click that, I go to the stage version. So this is actually the result of my pull request already being available.
With the one with the authorization?
Yeah. So if I go to videos now, this will be a weird one. It will actually just work. And this is a trick that we need to think about how to solve this, since Blazor does this client side. So Azure doesn't know we're going to /videos, so we're not seeing the login screen yet.
But the API is, I think the API is aware of...
no, actually,
or not.
Probably it's just not started yet, since it's provisioning in the back. But the cool thing is that if I refresh now, I will still go back to our videos, and we saw 404 the first time. See, now the videos are there. But the cool thing is, if I go straight into our videos page, so for instance, let's go to Firefox, where I'm not logged in by default, and then if I go to that location, it will automatically ask me, dude, you need to sign in, since you need to be authenticated to be able to see the videos page. So that's how straightforward it is to define routes in a static web app config.json file to actually enable authorization also on a Azure Static Web App.
Yeah, really cool.
And I think that's what I wanted to show, except for the fact that, of course, everybody needs to go and look at the podcast videos and then especially listen to the podcast, since they're kind of cool. But this is how we can build Blazor WebAssembly web apps that actually run for free or nearly free in a static web app, running an Azure function in the background, talking to table storage, and it's all provisioned for us as soon as we point our Azure environment into our GitHub repo where our information is.
Yeah, very cool. Also, how the whole GitHub integration works. It's
well,
really nice.
The cool thing is actually that they started out with GitHub integration, and only recently they've added Azure DevOps integration. So it wasn't even available in the beginning. So they're targeting a very specific market inside of the development community. And I think that it's actually a pretty decent solution that they have available.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.